In this lesson, we will discuss measuring length. We'll talk about the different units for measuring length, as well as the appropriate tools given the units that we're measuring. This is all part of our unit on measuring length. In the next unit, we'll talk about how to actually measure length with these tools that we've selected. So this is literally just about the different units that we'll encounter here in school in America, and what tools we use typically, depending upon the size of the item or object being measured. All right, so what is length and why do we measure it? Well, length, simply put, is the distance between 2 points. It's a type of measurement that tells us how long or wide something is. We measure length in everyday context to determine how long an object is. Some examples of measuring length that you might use in your everyday lives include when you are measuring furniture to fit into a given space. So not only are you measuring the furniture, but you might also be measuring the dimensions of the area that you want to put it in, or the overall dimensions of the room to see what will fit. We measure our body's own length, our height, at the doctor's office every time we go get a checkup. And we also measured 2 or more items to compare relative lengths, okay? And this helps us determine which one is longer, which one is shorter, which one is wider, which is thinner. So how do we measure length? Well, there's actually quite a few tools that we can use. There's really a variety of them. And so when selecting an appropriate tool for measuring length, it's really important to consider the relative size of the object being measured. So when I say relative size, I mean, what category would it fall under? Is it a small object? Is it a medium-sized object? Is it a large object? Is it an extremely large object? I'm talking more about like the adjectives that we would use to describe the object itself, okay? So once you kind of know what the size is, is it big, small, medium-sized, that will help you to choose an appropriate tool. And so we choose tools that allow us to determine the most precise measurements of the object. And when I say precise, I mean precise and appropriate, okay? And so to measure the smallest place value is what we mean by being precise and appropriate. So if you're measuring something small, you'll probably measure it in inches and centimeters. If you're measuring something long, like your body's height, you're going to measure it in feet and inches, okay? And that is most appropriate because of the size of the object that you are measuring. Now, the tools will be different, right? If you're measuring something small, you want inches and centimeters, you're going to use a ruler. Whereas if you're measuring something longer, like your own body's length, i.e. your height, you're probably going to want to use a tape measurer just because it incorporates a longer length and therefore allows you to measure continuously the same object. Whereas if I used a ruler to measure my body, I'd have to stop, make a mark, and consistently, do that until I was able to finally figure out my height. But a tape measure is just easier. So you also want to factor in ease of use, okay, when determining an appropriate tool. So this is just a visual that talks about length. Again, length is the distance between 2 points. How long is the screw in centimeters? Well, the screw in particular, it is about 5.1 centimeters, okay? So that is a precise length. And here are some tools that we might use to measure things. I might use a ruler, which has centimeters as well. I might use measuring tape. I might use, there's actually different kinds of measuring tape, right? So just depending upon how you want to do it. There's also yardsticks. Those are also appropriate, depending upon what you're measuring. Okay, so centimeters and inches are best measured with a ruler. Most small objects, such as pencils, mobile phones, picture frames, glue sticks, etc., in our everyday environments can be measured with a ruler. A ruler contains both inches and centimeters. Inches are a part of the American Standard Measurement System. And so America is definitely unique in that we still incorporate the imperial standard measurement system. And so we use inches, whereas a ruler also incorporates centimeters, and centimeters are part of the metric system. The metric system is what is used internationally So if you're doing research, you're going to be using the metric system if you were to measure length for something, just because it's more commonly understood internationally. And so a ruler is 12 inches long or 30 centimeters long. Now, these are what we call equivalent lengths. Okay, they are the same length. 30 centimeters is equal to 12 inches. They might be different units, but they are the same value, okay? They have the same length overall. It's just different ways of looking at the same length, okay? All right, so if we wanted to measure something that was medium-sized, we'd use inches and feet, and we would use perhaps a yardstick. So most medium objects, such as tables, doorways, bulletin boards, etc., can be measured using a yardstick. A yardstick resembles a longer version of a ruler. A yardstick contains both inches and feet. A yardstick itself is 36 inches long or 3 feet long. It is also 1 yard long. So I know I'm throwing a bunch of different units at you. Again, depending on what you're measuring, you will pick the unit. So if measuring inches is more appropriate, you would pick inches as your unit. If measuring in feet was more appropriate, you would pick feet as your unit of measurement. So either way, these measurements are all equivalent, much like I stated in the previous slide, meaning that though they are different units of measurement, right? Inches and feet and yards are different from each other. They are all equal to each other in this sense, okay? So 12 inches equals 1 foot. Those are equivalent measurements. 36 inches, which is the length of a yardstick, equals 3 feet, okay? 3 feet and 36 inches are equivalent lengths. And lastly, 3 feet equals 1 yard. So if you were to, use the transitive property, right, of knowing that 36 inches equals 3 feet and 3 feet equals 1 yard, you could say 36 inches equals 1 yard, and that would be appropriate and true, okay? They are equivalent lengths. It's really hard to enunciate properly on here. Okay, last one. If you're measuring something large, you're probably going to want to use feet and yards, and you might use a measuring tape. So whether you use a yardstick or a measuring tape just really depends on the total length of the object. If you're going to be measuring larger objects, I would say go for measuring tape. Okay, this one in particular in the picture is 25 feet long, and that is a lot easier to measure continuously than, say, using a yardstick where I'd have to stop and make a mark and, realign my yardstick to continue measuring something. So like I said, most large objects, these are like walls, vehicles, houses, they can be measured using measuring tape. Additionally, certain objects, such as those that are cylindrical or round in nature, are easier to measure with measuring tape due to the contours of the object. And so measuring tape is great because it can wrap around these objects and give you a more accurate measurement. Whereas if I used a yardstick to measure something cylindrical, that wouldn't really make so much sense because a yardstick, unfortunately, is flat. It is not pliable. I can't bend it. Okay, but I can contour, I can adjust measuring tape to fit the shape of my container or the shape of whatever I'm measuring. Okay. So measuring tape comes in a variety of sizes. Not all of them are 25 feet long. Some are longer, some are shorter. So depending upon what you're measuring, you'll have to find a long enough measuring tape, so that you can measure continuously as opposed to having to stop at 25 feet, make a mark, and then restart measurement, and then add those two measurements together. So measuring tape includes inches and feet, which can then be converted to yards. So I've included the same values, right? 12 inches is equal to 1 foot. 36 inches is equal to 3 feet. And if you were to multiply, right, 12 times 3, you get 36, and then 1 times 3 is 3. So there you go. It's a factor of 3. 3 feet is equal to 1 yard. So if I had 3 yards, I would need to do 3 feet times 3, right, to get that same equivalent value. And so it would be 9 feet. 9 feet equals 3 yards. So again, in this lesson, we're not focusing so much on equivalent measurements as we are on understanding the different units that you might use, right? Inches, centimeters, feet, and yards, as well as the different tools that you might utilize in your everyday lives to measure objects, which again include rulers, yardsticks, and measuring tape. Which unit you use and which tool you use will depend upon the object that you are measuring and how precise you want to be in your measurement, okay? Luckily, measuring tape has a lot of the units that we've discussed, right? It has inches, it has feet. Some of them even indicate yards, which is really helpful. So measuring tape is a great way to go when you're measuring something and you're unsure of what unit or what tool to use. Measuring tape is great. Okay, we'll go over this more in depth in class today.